What's in a name in a lot of areas of life? Names have meaning, names mean something. But when you think about God, God was referred to by people and by himself in many different names. They used many different names to refer to God throughout the entire scriptures. And I thought to myself, if names have meaning and names have power, we've got to think about, all this time and effort, what's the perfect name to say what we are as a church? Then it made me think, if you reflect on what God's names were or are, doesn't that mean something? Doesn't that tell us about him, who he is, what he does, about his character? So basically, I want to examine today all of the names that are given to God in the Bible and what exactly they mean. What does it mean, this name? What does it tell us about God? Because, we've dedicated our lives to God. We believe in God. We follow God. So I think we should understand what his names actually mean to give us a better understanding of him. First of all, he does have an actual proper name. Now, that's confusing because I don't think it's actually a name that's supposed to be spoken. So that's kind of a strange situation to be in when your name is not really meant to be spoken. So what the Jews did, they made, a word out of it, but it technically was not a word that they believed they should speak. And so at some point in time, that word that was supposed to be written without vowels, that was actually God's actual name, was kind of Latinized from the Hebrew. And we hear that name a lot in our churches, some more than others, but Jehovah, which actually more accurately pronounces Yehovah. But the actual Hebrew, when it was referred orally, was Yahweh. So it's very confusing. The Jews don't even speak it, and now they'll just use a Hebrew word that means Lord when they say that, because they don't even like to say it. So, but he actually has a name. So depending on your perspective, and Yahweh, Jehovah, Yehovah, I don't know. It's something along those lines, depending on who you talk to. But that's his actual proper name. As he referred to himself, that is. Now, I mentioned just a minute ago that the Jews started just referring to him in a Hebrew name that meant Lord. That's very common. Now, what does Lord mean? And I said in Bible study today that I was researching the different dictionaries for this week's service, and I came across every dictionary had a different definition. So I kind of mixed and matched and just put, as much as I could, because they all disagreed online to a certain extent. But the word Lord means having power. It means authority. It means a master or a ruler. So God is all those things. I mean, who has more power than God? Nobody. Who has more authority than God? Not a being. Who should be our master and our ruler? God should. So I think Lord makes sense. I think that's why it's used so much, even today. Also in the Bible, God is referred to as Holy One. Now, to understand, we know what one means. It means the single person that they're talking about. But what does Holy One mean? Holy itself means exalted. It also means worthy of complete devotion. But that definition goes on. It doesn't mean just worthy of complete devotion, period. It means worthy of complete devotion as one perfect in goodness and righteousness. And that's how God is referred to in the Old Testament at times, Holy One. And I think all of that is just beautiful. And I think as we think about that, we should exalt God. We should wake up every day and talk to God and treat God like he's worthy of complete devotion as one perfect in goodness and righteousness. Many times in the Bible, God is referred to as king. The definition of king is pretty simple, but I'll still, recite it to you. It's a male ruler, the most important, the best, or most respected. Now we know that God's not a male as in the sense of the flesh that we are. Obviously Jesus himself was. But God's always described in a masculine sense in that sort of way, as God is who he is or what he is. He's definitely the most important thing there is. Without him, we'd have nothing. I talked to my son who doesn't currently believe right now, says to me, how can you love God more than your family? And I said, well, you know how much I love my family, but how can I not love God more than anything? Without him, I wouldn't have my family. Like, without God, I wouldn't have eyes to see you, or ears to hear you, or skin to touch you, or like everything I have is owed to God. Of course I'm going to love him more than anything. Without him, I wouldn't have a wife, or a daughter, or a son, or anything. Everything good flows from God. So he's the most important. He's definitely the best. Once again, we're still talking about him referring to as king. But this one I love because it's just so important. The most respected. A king should be the most respected person in the room by definition. Now, God doesn't necessarily demand respect in some sort of authoritative, respect me or die way, but he demands respect just by who he is. Not only does he have the power to create everything that we know, but he holds that power back and doesn't use it against us when we do wrong. He just loves us. But literally, his respect comes from just knowing him, knowing what he's like as a God. Like, I remember in school, hearing, fear God. And I went to a Christian school, and they always told you, that doesn't mean be afraid of God in that sense. They said respect him. And so I never got the vibe that people are supposed to be afraid of God, even when we read in the Bible that says to fear him. But some people think that. Some people think that you're literally supposed to be terrified of God. No, you're supposed to respect God. I have a healthy respect for fire, right? Like, I know that, it could burn me up. And so but I don't know that God is going to burn me up, and so I don't fear God like I fear fire. But regardless, I respect God not because of his power, I respect him because of his love. And I think that's how God wants to be respected. Let's go into a verse. I need somebody to pull out their Bible, because now let's get a little more specific with God in the flesh. Let's talk about Jesus. Because Jesus had many names too. And his names, we're going to be going to Isaiah. His names were many. Prophesied. He had many prophesied names of how people would refer to him. They were very descriptive of his character and who he is. Because God in the flesh, Jesus Christ himself, is the biggest example of everything we need to know about God right in front of our eyes. So these names mean a lot. Isaiah 9, chapter 9, verse 6. If somebody would be willing to read Isaiah 9, verse 6, and we'll go through some of those names.
For a child is born to us, a son given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace.
Now, that has always been a set of names that have always intrigued me. Like around Christmas, sometimes you'll hear that in different Christmas stories. You hear a lot of that verse at Christmas time. But even, I always, throughout the year, I'll think back at that. Because it means something. It's poetic, and it's beautiful, and it's powerful. They're saying, this is prophesied before Jesus was born. It's talking about of him coming, the Son of God, how he's going to be referred to. And let's just start at the top. Wonderful. That's the first one. Wonderful. What does wonderful mean? It means causing marvel, delight, pleasure, extremely good. So the first thing it lists about Jesus, who is God in the flesh, the perfect example for us to understand all about God, wonderful, causing marvel, delight, pleasure, extremely good. Now, do we wake up every day and think about Jesus and marvel and feel delight and pleasure? We should, because that's the first name listed of what he is. The second one's counselor. What's a counselor? A counselor provides help, advice, or encouragement. Now, we talked about that a lot in Sabbath school, about how God, basically guides us, helps us. God, how can I do this? Well, he's a counselor, right? Jesus is our counselor. He provides help, advice, encouragement. But here's another part of the definition for a counselor. And I thought this was kind of unique and interesting too if you stop and think about it. A counselor is also what a senior officer in diplomatic services is referred to. I'll read that again. A senior officer in diplomatic services. So what's a diplomat do? They kind of have to weed through bickering people, going at each other, not getting along, fighting, saying one thing, saying another thing. The diplomat's in there neck deep in it all, trying to make peace out of it, trying to get somewhere with it, trying to bring people together, trying to make something positive happen. We don't have to look outside in the world to need a senior officer in diplomatic service, because you just go to a church and you need a senior officer in diplomatic services to help you weed through church life sometimes. But that's what Jesus is. I mean, Jesus, whenever there's disagreements, whenever there's problems, Jesus is our senior officer in diplomatic services, and we turn to him and all get worked out. Mighty God. That's another name prophesied in the book of Isaiah about how people refer to Jesus when he's here. Mighty God. Well, we know what God means. It's kind of a hard word to define God, but we know what it means. But mighty means possessing great and impressive strength. And this goes back to the whole respect thing, is referring to him as king, the most respected person there is. Because he has great and impressive strength, and he holds it back when he's angry. He doesn't use it to force anything on anybody at any time, but he could. I mean, if I had that power, it'd take a lot of convincing to get me not to use it. But he is better than I, because he doesn't do that to any of us. He loves us and lets us make our decision of whether we want to love him back. Now, this is a little bit different than most versions, because I've got a new toy. I talked about it weeks ago. I don't know if some of you were here when I talked about it, but I have really gotten into the modern literal version of the Bible. They take the original Greek and the Hebrew, and it's an open source Bible. It's constantly being tweaked and redefined to get is literally translated in modern English, the original Hebrew in the Old Testament and the original Greek in the New Testament. And I love it. It opens up the meanings of everything. And I actually gave a sermon not too long ago talking about the words like believe. Like the believe in the Greek in the New Testament doesn't mean I believe you exist. Whenever Jesus said in the Bible, believe in me, he wasn't saying believe that I'm actually a real person, because they saw him. They knew he was actually. It means obey me and follow me. That's what the Greek word that's used in most translations is not actually mean believe like, hey, I believe that Santa Claus is real. It means obey me and follow me. And doesn't that make so much more sense than just saying, I believe that Jesus is real, I'll see you at the bar tonight? I hear it, I see it, that doesn't really make sense. But believe, obey, and follow me, that makes a little bit more sense in my world. But the reason I brought that up is because in this translation, the modern literal version, it says Father of Eternity is one of his names. One of his names will be Father of Eternity. And I'm not going to stop on that long and look it up in the Webster's Dictionary, because I know what Father means, I know what eternity means, but I just think it's beautiful. Because we were talking about earlier about hope in our Bible study, right? We're talking about how do people do it without the hope of God? Well, when his name is Father of Eternity, he's the Father of ever, forever, and ever, and ever, ever. It's all in his hands, it's all in his pocket. That makes you feel secure at night. Lastly in that verse, Prince of Peace. And I've been thinking about peace a lot lately, because I don't think people give peace a chance. Because you hear that word and you think peace means not having war, but every area of everybody's life, we need peace. We need peace in our marriage, we need peace in our family life, we need peace in our workplace, we need peace in our church life. We're all searching for peace, whether we stop and think about it, whether we admit it. We're all looking for peace. Well, Jesus Christ is the Prince of Peace. He's the only person, the only being that can actually bring peace. And that's what he's done. For dying on the cross, ultimately he brings all peace. All right, I want to go to another set of verses real quick. Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. We're going back to the Old Testament, but it's all relevant, new, old, and everything in between. God is like referring to himself as I am. Now, what does that mean? Like, I remember hearing that as a kid and thinking, that's weird. But as I've gotten older, it just kind of makes me, I don't know, it makes me just stop and think, and that's just, it's still strange, but it interests me more and more every passing year. And so I looked into it a little bit more. And basically when God says, I am, what does he mean? Well, this is what he means. He means by saying that he is the being and coming forth of all things in the universe. Let's listen to that. When God says, I am, the best biblical definition there is God is saying, I am the being and coming forth of all things in the universe. That's heavy. That's some philosophical stuff right there. If you stop at night and up at night at 3 o'clock in the morning, you try to ponder that, I mean, that's deep. Like, I can't even hash that out, but I think that that's a pretty good summation of what how God would describe himself, and it makes a lot of sense. I am. What do you mean you are? What do you mean I am? The being and coming forth of all things in the universe. And then Jesus himself, when he was on earth, got the Pharisees livid by referring to himself in a sort of kind of way, I am. Because they knew exactly what he's talking about. They were not confused about what he said, tying himself to that title of I am. That is a deep, deep, serious description of God. When Jesus was here, he was referred to the Son of God, which tells us that he was fully God. He also was referred to the Son of Man, as the Son of Man, which teaches us that he was fully man. He used both titles. He went by both, because he was both. So there's ever confusion with God. Was Jesus really fully God? Was he really fully man? Well, just look how he was referred to. The Son of God, the Son of Man. He was saying, listen, I'm both. Okay, another verse we're going to go to is John chapter 14, verse 6. Because this is one of the most important references, I believe, to our understanding of who God is based on what his name is or how he's referred to. And this is actually Jesus referring to himself. John 14, verse 6. Anybody have that? Faith, do you have it?
Mm-hmm. Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me.
Jesus is talking about himself. I mean, let's take it step by step. The way. Jesus said, I am the way. When Christianity first started, it wasn't called Christianity. It was called the way. And I think that it's a beautiful description because everybody's searching for a path. And Christianity and Jesus brought them the way. But that's what he says. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Those three things sum up basically all experiences that we encounter. We're all looking for a way. We're all searching for the truth. And we're all searching for this to have a life, a fulfilled life, a life with meaning, a life with everything that we want. To hash this out a little bit more, I will go to the interaction with Pilate, and that is John verse 18, verses 29 through 38. A little bit more verses. But this is the interaction that I just love. It doesn't get old to me.
All who love the truth recognize that what I say is true. What is truth? Pilate asked. Then he went out again to the people and told them, he is not guilty of any crime.
I love it. I just love it. Because it just puts chills down my spine that somebody be looking at the face of truth, the face of everything that is truth, and he'll say, what is truth? Like, to me, I just I get a chill. I'm like, he's looking at truth in the eyes, and he has the audacity to ask truth, what is truth? It's right in front of you. You're literally looking at truth, and you're asking that question. But the reason I had this set of verses with this is because Jesus referred to himself as the truth. And in this interaction, he's hashing that out more. He's saying, if you love the truth, basically, here it is. And I think that at the end of the day, that's one of the important names that Jesus was trying to hit home. Truth. Everybody wants truth. At least we should, right? In all the different religions, all the different lack of religions, and everything in between, we all think we have the truth. But there is only one truth, and that truth is God, and that truth is God in the flesh. And Jesus was trying to explain that to us. We're a little slow at times, but that's what he's trying to explain. So on one hand, you have ultimately what do God's names mean? You have truth at the end of the day. But there's another one that I think is just as important as truth. It's found in 1 John chapter 4, verse 16. On one side, as we sum up, because we could do this for a long time, because there are many, many references to God, and we could analyze them left and right, up and down. But just to summarize, to have what's in a name when it comes to God for dummies, for all of us who are just trying to figure this out as we go. On one hand, you have truth. On the other hand, you have 1 John chapter 4, verse 16.
We know how much God loves us, and we have put our trust in his love. God is love, and all who live in love live in God, and God lives in them.
This is the only place in the Bible that literally ties God to an attribute. And I've heard it said, this has not come from me, but I've heard it said by other people giving sermons and messages and speeches, that God, it doesn't say that God is loving, it's saying that God is love. And there's a big difference between the two. We can be loving, but it doesn't mean that we are the very definition, epitome of what love is. There's a humongous, tremendous difference between being loving and being love. God is love. And if we ever want to know how to love, if we ever want to know how to truly be loved and to give love, all we have to do is look in the Bible to not only see how God was referred to in name, and see what's in a name, right? Well, we know what's in a name. Love, truth, all goodness, all righteousness, all worthiness, all power, all strength, all that. But at the end of the day, Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and he's also love.